Okay, what's going on? Good evening. Tonight is Wednesday, July the 9th, 2025. And what we're going to look at today is the position that we ended up taking on NQ. I'm going to just stay kind of focused more on that today. Um, Look a little bit at dollar index. I'll also talk a little bit about QQQ and SPY very quickly. That kind of helped us with our confluence with dollar. And then I'll follow up as well with gold. Maybe I'll show you the markups as well for gold futures, and then the Nvidia and Tesla, just kind of seeing where they're at for the day. Okay, so that's where we're gonna start. We're gonna stick with gold. Try to get out of here. Hopefully, not too much longer than 30 minutes. We've been on a roll, right? So I hope you guys like these DRCs. Like I said, by the end of this week, I will um, get that document out to you guys so that you guys can follow along with your own personal writings and be able to, hopefully progress, right? The way I think there can be a perfection in trading, but it is through a progression, right? You're going to have great days where you do things a specific way where it's just very flawless. And there's going to be days on the bad days where you don't do things as well. And I think the one thing about the DRC that really helps for me is just being able to be objective to myself, right, from the emotional self, and be able to and do this, every day. If you go on my Instagram and you actually look at the little bubbles where it shows, for this year, I've been doing these every day, so that's why I'm deciding to do and take it a step further and do a recording. That's really for me, right? It is for other people, right? To see if they can help other people as well. But it's really at the end of the day, accountability for myself, right? To not only, personify the teachings that I look at every day here in my office, in front of me, consciously and subconsciously, just seeing it no matter what, whenever you're looking around. And so, yeah, that's kind of where, we were pretty much focused today. Is just, getting these DRCs and getting the understanding of why to do it and why, if you want to be elite, just keep working on this craft a different way, right? You're going to be misunderstood when you're different. So let's go over here to screen one here. Okay. And so first thing I just want to look at is obviously this was yesterday's dollar. So, me personally coming into my pre-snap read and before New York opened around like 7 a.m., I was actually looking for price to continue lower yesterday. And the reason being was because we only had like two options on smaller time frames, right? We could essentially go higher here on dollar 97 750 or 75 quarter, right? So we can only go above that area or go lower, right? And we ended up making that lower high. And this actually happened at 6 a.m. So 6 to 7 a.m. They took the Asian liquidity, big pump up. And then I wanted to see if they were going to continue to build off of that on higher time frames. And they weren't able to do that. And price started to break down. I started actually seeing a lot of people in different chats that I'm in for like Euro USD, where people were going long on positions because they were seeing dollars short. So all the correlations were happening pretty well. And so what I wanted to see was, since we were going to be coming down on dollar potentially, right, or breaking down, would we see like that up push on our futures and indices? And so obviously we're at all-time highs, not all-time highs for YM or US 30, but the other two, right, ES and Q. And give me one second. We're having kind of like a storm warning. All right, so the storm warning is kind of crazy, but let's go in a little bit deeper here. Dailies, right? So we're wanting to see how those dailies were going to print. And, this here didn't really give me that much information other than, the previous highs that we were looking at. But the one thing that I did see when it come to, US 30, YM, like ES, NQ, et cetera, was when you have the 4 hour directional play, right? So when, I have my friend and my business partner, he actually was selling, US 30 in this area, trying to see more lower pricing down in here, right? So down here in the 44 100s. But reason being is because if you see these lows, they just look relatively equal. they look like a really nice level of like what people would call support, which is usually a target for us, right? And so price is playing more to that support target in a sense. And so that's what we were kind of looking at for there. But we did want to see that push up today to that equilibrium area and see maybe could they go back up to market open and get into supply, but they weren't able to do that. And so then let's go just to 1 hours here. Okay. And so then before New York started, they were already pumping price. So they were what I call is, FOMO, right? So what they did is in the Asian session here, which you have here, the overnight traders, right? 6 p.m. into, that 2 a.m. London Open, right? That's NQ. And then this was ES, right? And so what they did in that time right there, and same thing with YM, right? In that same time, what they did is they just held price down, but for me, they held price inside that demand, right? But then overnight, London Open, buyers step into the market, price goes above daily open, closing with strength. This is all before New York, right? Showing us signs of strength of higher pricing. So I started to, identify some of these areas that were internal liquidity and then supply, and then all-time highs being in alignment with the 23,100 area, right? So that's kind of like before this big pump happened. And so this going into New York, this was like 7 a.m. This is when I really started game planning. And this is what I was starting to see, right? So we'll go just into NQ, and it's 15 and 5, and or 1 hour and 15, then we'll do 15 and 5. But this is like the bigger picture, right? I was seeing, we wanted to see this. They were already getting people, completely capitulating in their emotions at New York because they were pushing price at New York, and the location of those opens were crazy, right? And then I'll show you guys why I ended up looking for short positions today, and they ended up playing out pretty well. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, so we'll go to 15 and 5 here now. And if you're in the telegrams or in the group chats, and um, you guys, if you go back and obviously see the timing, you can see when we were looking for specific things. And, we were done for the day, but we ended up playing back our take profits on CFD, which was pretty cool. So just really quickly, let's just really kind of go through this. If you're playing the 1 minute on these type of trades, you're going to get really messed up because you got to understand price was going for this area 23,000, right? This was the first 15-minute open of New York, 8:30 to 8:45, right? In those first 15 minutes, price went from 978 to 23,050. So essentially it went like a little bit under 100 points, right? In the first 15 minutes. Now, focus your eyes here, okay? Think about this 5-minute open right here, right? So this is 8:30 to 8:35, right? From That's basically from, let's just say 975 up to 23,025, relatively like a little bit over 50 points. In the first 5-minute candle, guys, I promise you, I've been trading NQ long enough. I know because I was sitting here being patient. I was like, man, that was not, I was like, damn, that sucks. I didn't really want to see that, right? Because I wanted to see specific things and pullbacks. In the first candle, right? You tell me where you're buying this, right? I don't know if you have to go to 100 tick chart, whatever, right? But in the first candle, there's no way you're getting in this unless you're playing here or you waited on the close. You seen the pullback a little bit. You seen it kind of go up and you bought here and put your risk here, right? There's no way it's just you'd be forcing the trade or you guessed, right? Because you would have had no risk placement there. I mean, if someone else can show me, getting the trade there, please. I mean that's so going back to the 8:30 to 8:35, price closed here, right? 8:35, 8:40 here. And I'm always focused on the first 5-minute close and the first 15-minute close of the open. Right. And then 8:35 to 8:40, 8:40, right? Right here to 8:45. We're still making higher opens, higher closes. We're also breaking through levels. Right. So one thing that I look for when I'm going in to short the market is, are buyers taking profit? right? Is it an area where buyers are going to take profit? So why would the buyers, if you're not seeing any signs of weakness on a 5 minute, take profit if they haven't even reached the higher time frame target, right? Don't forget, right? We're looking for areas on the 1 hour of all-time highs, right? The highs from July the 3rd, 2025, right? 23,100 all-time high. And so as we get to 8:45, right? That first 15 minutes, this is 8:45 to 8:50, price blast back up again, right? So basically from 55 up to, let's say, 85. So six, seven, so that's about 30, 40 handles, right? Just in that 5 minute. Now, the whole time I'm watching this, what I'm looking for, as you guys see, is this red box because I'm making sure that if they're going to hold that range, they're either going to play in or outside the range. We knew that, right? And so if they were going to hold inside this range like this, we were prepared for that. But once they started to close candles, right, above that range, we knew that price had the ability now to go and take this level here, if that makes sense. Okay. And so what I'm waiting for is for the buyers to want to be at the all-time pivotal moment, all-time highs, for them to do what? To give back their position, right? Because who's buying above this green line? Who's buying even up in here? Either a noob or a novice trader or someone that's just really greedy, right? Because if you guys understand how trading works, buy low and sell high, as a buyer in this position, like, and there's people that most likely, what I think happened is they bought halfway here, they bought 23,000 or 22, yeah, 23,000. They bought here and they probably bought somewhere in here, and price ran up and hit that all-time high. Now you got to think, right? For these individuals to get out of these markets, we're talking futures here, right? What has to happen, right? They have to put that sell limit in. They have to put some kind of order in, right, to fill. And so they need that novice noob, that new trader, that person that just doesn't know to be able to be on the other side of that order for it to fill. So you want to wait on higher time frame liquidity to be grabbed so that you can get those type of turnaround entries. Now, in the chats, really quick, let's see here. All right, here in the chats, you can see the timing, 9:32 a.m., right? We were looking at this at New York Open inside the groups. Where was this here? Right, we were looking for it right here around 9:57, and we ended up finding it, right? And so now I'm going to show you guys kind of where we found it. So right here is where time, like this is where like I love to, flip things upside down because I'm a better buyer than seller. But in this situation right here, price had been pushing and pushing and finally had reached outside the range. And then you finally had here at 9:15 to 9:20 a 5 minute exhaustion candle, right? Now, when that candle showed me that sign of exhaustion, I have three different setups because I play NQ a very specific way, right? Now, if I'm looking at a short position after the exhaustion, I'm waiting for the push back up, the inversion, whatever you want to call it, to the downside. To me, it's just an upside down mitigation buy. But I'm always thinking about where's my risk. So most of the time, I like to have my risk with HOD. Now, the way I play NQ is an A plus setup is like a 10-point risk to an edge. A B plus setup is about a 20-point risk. And then a C is a 25. Like, and I'll only drop one contract on that across the accounts. Right. I'm not gonna. And so I was looking at this as my risk, and then I said, okay, I'm gonna accept this as my risk, right? For about 22 points. And my target was New York Open. Right. So when we all started talking about this trade in the chats, right, my target was to get down to New York Open. So we started off like in here. I don't know how if it shows up that well, but once we ended up getting that entry, we wanted to see New York Open and Market Open as a give back spot. And so exhaustion candle, risk was here, price was to get a below New York Open anywhere in that area. I mean, if you don't really get out of there fast, it's kind of like, you're just waiting and waiting and waiting. So for me, I was reading candles. Like we kept making 5 minute, like lower candle here. So we came up. I know a lot of buyers stepped into the market and people were like freaking out. And then that next candle, 940, 945, we made a lower low, 945 to 950, another low, right? And then we had the 950 to 955. And as we're pushing into that 10 a.m., I'm trailing risk to here. Then I trailed risk to here, and then price came back and took us out around 1020 on the shorts. Now think about this, okay? This makes complete sense. If markets aren't going to capitulate and just fall and jump out the window, right? Because bears jump out of the window and go for the accumulation and low of day and go lower than the daily low, wasn't even going lower than the daily low, right? And buyers were doing, or excuse me, sells myself, right? Were getting out. What has to happen for a sell to get out of the market? I had to put a buy limit in, right? So bam, I didn't put a buy limit in. I trailed my risk here. I trailed my risk here. But when the price shot up to here, my buy limit was triggered, which took me out of my short. Now I seen price go up back to where? New York open, right? And reject and come back to where? Demand. What time did this happen? What time do I say I clock out? 11:15 a.m. Right? So 10:55 to 11 to 11:05. I seen a sign of strength. Price comes back 11:05 to 11:10, 11:10 to 11:15. Everything's shaping up off the edge with a target. You guys see the target here? And so what am I attacking now? Because I had trailed my risk so violently down on those shorts, I knew most people had their risk here, right? So on that buy position, right, for our CFDs, when it came down to this area at the right time, we were able to frame up the edge off of here and build into it with two positions, attacking, like I said, area one, and then attacking up into this next area, which is going to be where the crown will formed area here, right? And so for me, on the trailing risk that I had on the overnight trade that I was anticipating to go higher, like on the CFD pricing, I actually trailed the risk and it already came for that area, which was here, right? And so it just shows you though, you know what I mean? Like the markets are moved to me by an algorithm and it's just order flow, right? It's simply just order flow, right? And that sell, like I said, those are the signs I like to look for. It's like a 5 minute exhaustion candle. You know, I'm not gonna sit there on a 1 minute and just get chopped up, right? Because most of the time it's the same way I talk about on the buy side. Most people, right? Most people they come into this and they lose probably like two trades in here because they're not being patient enough to wait for a signal to see a true sign of weakness to enter into the market, right? And so you lose two or three trades and then you finally find that one, right? No, we ended up one shot killing that today. Let me see if I can pull this up here really quickly. And then, like I said, the trade management was very aggressive, right? Price fell in our favor, gave us enough candle. Price broke, made that new low, immediately trailed it down, and was able to, pay yourself as the market makes money available, right? We have a system for that. Let me see if I can pull this up really quickly. Okay, so it'll let me show it from one account at a time, but it was copied over to pretty much all the orders. So I don't know if it'll let me show the exact one. Let me see here. Okay, I was just trying to make sure the spreads are right. But yeah, if you guys are in the Telegram, you guys are getting the updates on those. But that's pretty much how we played it today. I mean, I didn't feel like today, like the one main thing that I was pretty happy that I improved upon today, like those the four different things that we talk about, right? One, you improved upon. What did you improve upon? Two, what did you learn? Three, changes that you need to make from today, and what was the overall, just overall of the day. You know, the thing that I improved upon was I was able to wait on the buyers at New York because I knew that was just on even on looking at that first minute, right? I knew that there was no way that people were getting in without forcing the trade, right? So I was very grateful and I was happy that I improved upon that and my patience. Um, and then what I learned is something that might stick with you guys is that shorts are short-lived, right? You have to have a plan to scale out of these shorts in a market that usually is going up, right? We continue to make all-time highs. Technology, AI, things are just going very well in that space. And so when you're trading in this space, shorts are short-lived. So like I said, if you need any help or have any questions on the trailing risk factor on the short side, just let me know. And then even on the buy side, just let me know. But yeah, so that was one of the things that I pretty much thought, and the things I needed to change from today. I would say it was very, it was, there's, like I said, there's never going to be just a perfection, if you're really, someone who's very critical and wants to be a champion at certain things. But I would say the hesitation would be the only thing when we made the 5 minute. Like we made this, it was 9:15 to 9:20. We clearly had broke structure, right? We made the new lower low on a 5 minute. And when price was pushing back up into the 80 level, which is an algorithmic level that I love to play, the only thing that I was, you don't want to have to think or have reservation, right? So I already knew my risk placement. I already had that. I always picked that first, right? It's either was going to be HOD or here. And based off the number system and the probabilities of, from taking setups like this all the time, it was better here, right? And so I would say maybe I could have increased that risk by using this 5 minute candle here, right? And would have been playing to the same target for a little bit better of an R&R, right? So like that R&R that I ended up choosing was still about a 1 to 5 once I took profit. But if I would have been, put that risk, maybe like here, that like because here's something I've also learned too. Liquidity and risk reward is in the eye of the beholder, right? So like you actually, because we're in a market, you're creating the edge, right? So you're the one that's choosing, if how much you're willing to potentially give to the markets, right? So that right there just made it a little bit more stressful, and this put it in a situation to where I could, sit back and not have so much time under tension and be able to manage the trade as it moved in my favor. So yeah, that was the only thing I would say like I could have maybe changed. I could have, um, you know, yeah, just not hesitated a little bit and maybe I could have condensed that risk down. I could have sized up. I could have went an extra contract potentially as well. That's something I'm getting ready to do is start sizing into here like by next week, like by like next Friday, I'm going to evaluate kind of where I'm at equity wise and then start to size up just here a contract here and there. So yeah, there's a couple things that, I could have maybe changed, but overall it was a pretty good day. And it was just I would say a base hit, right? It was a day that was foundational, right? You're not gonna always, just slam it out of the park and hit these home run trades. So on the days that you don't, you really want to be critical that you're risking a predetermined number. So, um, overall day, I thought was pretty good, making all-time highs. Also here really quickly in alignment, if you're looking at this, the stuff I talk about a lot, just QQQ and SPY at the same time, New York Open was very manipulative, but it ran up and made new highs. And if you go back and kind of study the timing, QQQ had delivered the new high um, before NQ had, right? And we still haven't delivered on SPY yet, even though ES is booming, right? So that was very interesting. But like one thing I do read, right, is when price was failing to go lower and go into that demand, I was reading that read accumulation to push higher, right, in that second half of the day. And by doing that, what happens is like on in excuse me on NQ at the same time, you guys see how the timing is starting to accumulate and go higher. And same time, NQ is making higher highs and higher lows, right? So like prices coming in here, starting to set up inside this demand candle here under New York Open. At the same time, what is QQQ doing, right? Showing strength here to go push 50 or 555s, right? So they're working in unison. I really love when that's happening. And so let me see here. Okay. So yeah, when those are working in unison, QQQ and NQ, that's really good. And then just watching, NVIDIA, right, today as well was pretty good here because we're navigating at all-time highs, right? So New York Open was very aggressive, just like, the NQ. So seeing buyers stepping into this as well was pretty interesting as well. What was the other thing I was looking at today to follow up on? Last thing was gold, right? So we were looking at gold here on a higher time frame. So you can see gold futures were inside that daily demand candle. I thought was really nice. And then we started playing right here in this it's like the 30 or the 3300. Is that what that is? Yeah. So like right here in this area. Now I'm playing the CFD price, but I was looking here at the futures price. Let me see here. Okay, so this is where we were playing actually, right? When it comes to CFDs. So we were seeing this as like a low on the 4 hour, and this is a high. And then seeing like potentially like these were where they ran liquidity out before. It's not a previous day high anymore. It's definitely a week high though. It's on Monday's high. And so we were seeing potentially we had this buy, price went up. We took some partials in some 15 5-minute areas. Price ended up overnight coming back for our break evens on this position. And then today found a position pretty much right in here, right above New York Open, was able to see that breaker structure of the overnight player. Price kind of like fizzled around here to like 1 o'clock, then 2 o'clock, it made it to 3 o'clock, made a new high. And I was able to take the risk that I had on this trade here and just trail it to here, right? And so now I'm wanting to see if price is going to reach into that supply in that previous New York Open. And then if it does, then potentially will come for this high and 3350. So that's kind of what we're playing. And we just have those positions swinging right now. And yeah, so I hope that kind of helps out when it comes to that NQ breakdown and understanding, how do you want to wait for that short, wait for that all-time high price to be delivered, and then to be able to wait for a sign of weakness, right? Before you just guess 3 or 4 times, lose ammo, right? And then be able to find the move down. And then possibly, like I said, by understanding order flow, be able to, see the bounce back play, right? Because if we're bullish, we'll see. But going into tomorrow, I kind of like to leave you guys with a little something. Going into tomorrow, we're looking at this is the start of the week, right? This is pretty much everything of the week. Let's go to the end of day for tomorrow will be here. And so we got a lot of liquidity, right? Think about when you can, turn everything off here and you just kind of see what you can see. These are definitely equal lows. So these won't be low of days anymore. These are now the previous day lows, right? And so that's very interesting price right there. And then your previous day high is going to be now the previous HOD, right? So now these are your liquidity spots to kind of work with. And then high of week is also in alignment now with that previous day high. So when you go and you look at this, I would like to see price maybe deliver down here and possibly in that 4 hour for directional play, eventually get back down here where we ended up playing this buy once it took that liquidity and we're able to partial the same way and play up like that. So it just really depends. We're in all-time highs. So we could come into this area, right? We could come below, fill this imbalance here, reaccumulate, right? And eventually make our way back up for a new high of day. Who knows, right? But we'll see when we get up tomorrow morning. But let me see here this real quick. But yeah, 'cause I don't like to be like Nostradamus and try to predict anything like that. But we'll see what dollar does. We'll see what gold does. Like I was saying, see if we can actually break this structural high and start to reach in that 4 hour. And we'll see what happens. But I appreciate you guys watching. Like I said, leave in the comments anything that you guys would like to see, maybe stock wise as well, just the structure, and maybe we can see if there's any opportunities. And if there's anything that you guys would like me to change or just things that we can make for the community and culture of the channel better, just let me know. But we'll be back again tomorrow. And like I said, by the end of this week, we will have that DRC document to where you can just message me and I'll get it to you. So have a good rest of your week, trade safe, and have a good night.